No pressure. I just want to make sure. I'm one of those people where if there's a checklist, I have to check every single box. But yeah,
Okay.
so thank you so much, Stephanie. This was, yeah, it was so wonderful to meet you and to meet other nerdy bird art people. So I'm Rosemary Mosco. I'm a cartoonist and science communicator, and I am thrilled to be here. So as Stephanie mentioned, I call myself a science communicator, which is a term for someone who bridges the gap between scientists and the public. So I try to speak with scientists, I try to speak with members of the public, and I read studies about how to best communicate. I read surveys to find out what people want to learn about, and then I act as a go-between. And there are lots and lots of people who do this. So it's a very broad term. So what that means in practice is I get to spend some time with wild critters. I really miss my purple hair, but it was a lot of upkeep. So here's a marbled salamander that I found, a Luna moth, and doing some bear tracking down in Florida. And then I spend a lot of time indoors, so I write and draw. So here are two examples. I wrote and drew an article for Audubon about the house sparrow and kind of the human history and science of the house sparrow. And I did a t-shirt for Georgia Bird Fest 2022 in which I tried to make a wood stork look cute, which was really challenging. I write a lot of books. So I have 8 books out. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're mostly for kids. Some are for adults, and they're mostly about nature. And then there's one space one. And I have 3 more coming out that I'm afraid I can't talk about, but I'm excited. One is very bird related. But most people know me for my cartoons, and I put them online under the name Bird and Moon, which comes from my very first cartoon, which I made in 2004. And it was about a lonely bird who meets the moon, and the moon is a bird and turns into a bird, and they go on all sorts of adventures. And I was living in Toronto, as you can see from the city image there. That's the CN Tower in Toronto. So this is a little excerpt from it. But what I do now is sort of shorter form, silly comics, often about bird science. So here's one of my more recent ones. So to set the stage, the northern cardinal. So we all love northern cardinals. They're one of the most popular birds. I couldn't find the stat, but someone told me once that they're the most reported bird on eBird. So everybody just loves this bird so much. It is the state bird of 7 different states, which is a bit overkill if you ask me. Like, I think maybe we should pick a few other local birds, but people just love them. What they don't love is when they do this. So sometimes people panic because they see cardinals that look like this in their backyard. Males and females will do this. And some people will think that there's something wrong with the cardinals, or that they've discovered a new species. I've heard people report birds that are round and red with a blue head. Luckily, this is not a permanent thing, and it's probably natural. So you'll sometimes see people say that it can be because of mites or some other skin disease. Most of the time, as far as I can tell, and it's hard to know for sure, it's just a molt thing. They'll just catastrophically mold all their head feathers, and then they will grow them back. But they look pretty wild for a time. So I made this comic called Know Your Northern Cardinals. So we've got a juvenile cardinal, we've got an adult male cardinal, we have Bloodcheap, the frightful molt demon from the Cursed Abyss, and then we have an adult female cardinal. I apologize to anyone whose language involves actual umlauts used correctly. I know I did not do that here. I was going for a metal effect, so don't scrutinize Bloodcheap too closely. But that's the kind of thing that I do. And I also make a lot more serious comics in partnership with scientists and nonprofits. So I'm not going to go through these, but there's one here about how to tell a raven from a crow. There's one about how to stop birds from hitting your windows. I did one about whether you found a brown recluse spider or not. And I recently did one about rodenticides and why they can be dangerous for birds and that kind of thing. So really quick on how I got here. I have been obsessed with birds and other wildlife my whole life. So here's a picture of me with my very first pair of binoculars, these tiny Bushnell binoculars. And then every Halloween, I was some kind of animal that I made my own costume. And so this is me being a green-winged macaw. It's not super accurate, but I made it myself, so I was proud of myself. I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, which is the capital of Canada. And as you can see, is actually farther south than some of the US. Most of Canada lives south because it's warmer. And growing up, I spent a lot of time outside in nature. So this is a very Canadian childhood photo where I'm wearing a scarf that my mom knit, and I've got my black-capped chickadee out in the snow. So I was outside in nature, but then I was inside the rest of the time reading. So here's me, my little sister's on the bottom left, and then that's my mom, and then 3 family friends, and we're reading some kind of animal-related book, like I usually was reading. And I would read a lot of newspaper comics, which I know is dating myself, but I was obsessed with The Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes, For Better, For Worse, Bloom County, and a lot of other newspaper cartoons. And then I tried to make my own. So here's an example of one that I made where this worm is saying to her husband worm, "There's that noise again, George. Go see if that's the milkman, George." And it's an American Robin. I'm pretty sure that I copied this joke from one of my many joke books because there were not milkmen when I was young, but we did have those TVs with the little antennae on them. And I was really proud that I used an American Robin and put some field marks on it. So there's not a lot of guidance to be a science communicator. As any of you who are science communicators or educators, you know, anyone of that ilk will know, it is a winding road, but the scenery is beautiful and really cool. So some of the sillier things I've done include, on the left here, making a pint glass for a herpetological society meeting. So herpetologists drank beer out of drawings I made, which was exciting. I got to have a full color comic in the New York Times about pigeons, which included this tiny pigeon that's pooping. So I drew a pooping pigeon in the paper of record. And I got to go on Science Friday, at which point, across all of America on National Public Radio, I said the sentence, "I think we all need to hop aboard the butt train and ride it to Science Town," which I promised was relevant at the time, but I can't believe they let me say. So that's part of the winding road of science communication. And so in general, not much has changed. I'm still out wrangling critters, and I'm still making Halloween costumes. And this was one for grad school where I was a red spotted newt. So I am really excited to talk to you all. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
I I love your reference to the cartoons. I just dug out a whole bunch of Far Side books that I've had in tubs for like a decade. What a nice trip down memory lane. I also loved newspaper comics. And this was not a planned question, but do you have a Halloween costume planned for this year?
I don't. I wish I did. The last one I made was, so I don't like parties as much as I like making costumes. That's
Yeah.
my problem. So the last one I did was, I think, just pre-COVID. I made there's an animal from the Burgess Shale, this fossil complex that I think is about 550 million years old or something. There's this animal called Opabinia that is this arthropod that has kind of a trunk-like nose and then 5 eyes that stick out. And so I made an Opabinia costume, and I
Wow.
wore it to a party, and it turns out no one else was wearing any costumes, so I took it off, and that was it. That was the last
Oh
time.
no.
So maybe
Oh,
someday, maybe someday.
you should bring that out again.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, we'll get into some questions that some of our members submitted. They kind of cover 3 main topics broadly, like birds, general science, and art. Um, so we'll start with birds. I'm going to share my screen. They kind of go along with the questions that are planned. And remember, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. Let's see. How do I do this on my end? Share screen. Share. And yeah, all right. So, Caitlin, one of our members, has read your book, Butterflies Are Pretty Gross, as shown here. She loved it. Do you have a favorite gross bird fact?
Yeah, I do. I love gross gross animal facts of all kinds. And this was a real joy to make this butterfly book because I have a niece and nephew, and they've been into poop jokes for a few years at this point. It doesn't really get old. But my favorite gross bird fact is not poop related, it's related to milk. So I wrote a book about pigeons, and I was delighted to learn that I knew that some birds sort of made a form of milk, but I didn't really understand the logistics. So pigeons make milk, both males and females do, and they make it in their esophagus. They don't have mammary glands. It's convergently evolved alongside mammalian milk. It has a lot of weird similarities. So it's stimulated by the hormone prolactin, which is what stimulates lactation in humans. It's got fats and proteins and all this good stuff. But because it's in their throat, it kind of sloughs off from their throat, and they kind of puke it into their babies' mouths. And it gives them a huge nutrition boost early on, so they don't have to be in the nest for that long. But also it's apparently really cheesy. And I never actually got to see it because, you don't see it. They just kind of puke it right into their baby's mouths. So that's my favorite gross bird fact, is pigeons make milk.
That is gross. Wow. All right. Very cool. Okay, so this is a favorite cartoon by one of our members, Pat, and she asked if you can elaborate on how and why you chose the birds represented here.
I love this question. Yeah, so this is a joke that I wasn't sure anyone else but me would find funny, which happens a lot. Sometimes I'm right and nobody else finds it funny, but people like this one, so that made me really happy. So this is I was struggling to find a Halloween themed comic about something I hadn't done before, and then I started to imagine, well, what if birds tried to carve pumpkins? So the pileated woodpecker on the top left, they when they're hunting for carpenter ants, they will cut these weird rectangular holes in trees. So I have these rectangular holes that it has cut. And then sapsuckers, so it's a yellow-bellied sapsucker on the right, they will drill these long horizontal rows of little sap wells, and then they'll drink the sap that's welling up. So that's what's going on over there. And then we have a satin bowerbird that's making a bower. So male bowerbirds will make this twig structure, and it's not actually a nest. It's just sort of a place where they will mate with the females, and they make it really nice. And then they're attracted to blue items, so they will bring in blue items. So I had it bring in blue candy to attract a female. And then on the right is a loggerhead shrike. So shrikes are amazing. They impale their prey on sharp spikes and then come back later to pick them up. They actually, where I live in the Northeast, they maybe don't have access to as many spiky things. So they will just sort of, northern shrikes is what we have up here. They'll just sort of leave prey hanging. So I once found it just a mouse just hanging from some twigs. And it was over a guy who was giving a talk, and there was just sort of this dead mouse hanging. So they can be kind of gruesome. So that's what's going on with the loggerhead shrike, is it is impaling its pumpkins onto a spiky surface, which I think is pretty Halloweeny.
That's fabulous. I didn't realize we had shrikes in the northern part of the Northeast, because you're in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, we get northern shrikes. So the loggerhead shrikes have really big heads. We will get a loggerhead shrike or two every year that will kind of wander up, and
Oh,
they're
wow.
exciting. But yeah, we'll get northern shrikes. They're unusual to see. You have to kind of know where to find them. But down in Florida, you will just find loggerhead shrikes. I once drove past this area that was all barbed wire, and every few feet there was a loggerhead shrike standing on the barbed
Oh my
wire.
God.
So yeah, they're very
Just like
cool.
a cemetery, a bird cemetery. That
Mhm.
is wild. And then bowerbirds are in Australia? We don't have
Yeah,
any
yeah, I
here.
think so. I don't know if they're also found in New Guinea. I think maybe in Australia. I've not been to that area. I'm way more familiar with our local birds.
Yeah,
And there's a bunch of different species, and some of them do some funny dances and have different colors. But yeah, yeah, I
that's
love
cool.
them.
And then obviously, we have pileatids, and I just saw a yellow-bellied sapsucker last week here. They're back to PA, so that's exciting. All right. So, as you mentioned before, you showed the cover of your book, Pigeon Watching, which actually just found in our local library, so that's pretty cool.
Yay.
Um, and you tell us some reasons why you feel like these common birds are misunderstood.
Yeah, I am still obsessed with pigeons, and this book has been out for a couple of years now, and I thought I would get sick of them. You know, sometimes if you spend so much time with one subject, you get tired. I've never gotten tired. I've only fallen more in love with pigeons. The thing that I didn't really understand when I was younger about pigeons and starting bird watching was that they are all the pigeons in North America, and in fact, most of the pigeons around the world of this particular species, Columba livia, the city pigeons are domesticated animals. So they were domesticated so long ago that we bump up against the dawn of recorded writing. So we actually don't know when exactly they were domesticated because we don't have any documents. So, 5 to 10,000 years ago. And there are very few, probably no pure wild pigeons left anywhere. They're all just descendants of these birds that we've sculpted over millennia. So when you go into the city and you see a flock of colorful pigeons, what you're looking at is a colony of feral cats or a pack of wild dogs, feral dogs. But we've forgotten that they are also a domesticated animal. And, so then I decided to make it my mission to tell people, we forgot that these birds were once beloved and intentionally created, basically.
Wow, kind of like I guess how squirrels got here too. I think they were pets at one point. Also, how fabulous to have Sibley put a quote on your front cover. That's so cool. Have you gotten to meet him?
Yeah, I have. I know. No, he's a really sweet guy. No, he's great. And yeah, he has been really encouraging to up and coming people who are in this field. So I think it was terrifying to send my stuff to David Sibley, and I sent it to Ken Kaufman, who was also great, and Julie Zickafoos, and some of my personal heroes, and I'm sending them my silly cartoons saying, hey, look at this, terrible art. What do you think? But
Oh, come on.
it was wonderful. But
I
yeah,
think it's
no,
just exciting to meet other people who are interested in this stuff.
yeah, and this book, as much as it's full of cartoons, is so rigorously researched. I mean, I went all out. I even hired a fact checker to make sure that I didn't make any little errors. She went through all of my research, and then I sent it to several academics, and they also went through all my research. So this thing is my baby, even though it, has this cute kind of exterior. So I'm proud of it.
Yeah, definitely. Just seeing it at Chester County Library, if anybody goes there, it is really like truly a guide with all your fun illustrations, cool little anecdotes. Definitely very neat.
Thank you.
Um, and this is a dumb question, but if you could be any bird, which one and why?
You know, I get that question, and it's really hard to answer. I think So I think I would want to be an albatross because they're my favorites. But the problem is I wouldn't want to be an albatross in the age of plastics. I would want to be an albatross, and also the age of long line fishing, and all these ways that albatrosses are being killed because most of the species are in trouble. But they're so incredible. They live a really long time, and they have this amazing thing where they're married, basically. They have a partner for life, but then when they've finished rearing a chick, they sort of wander off into the ocean alone, and they just fly and fly and fly for months on end, cruising around, going incredible distances, seeing amazing things, and eating and getting to explore. And then they go back and have this little domestic life. And there's something just amazing about these explorers who, come back to the exact same spot and the exact same mate. It's just a compelling story. I'm not saying anything about my husband that I want to be away from him for years on end, but yeah, I think they're just incredible, incredible birds.
I mean, it's like the best of both worlds. You get to do a lot of exploring, and then you come back to the thing and the mate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and
very
you live a
cool.
long time, and you get this amazing ability to soar. And yeah, I love albatrosses. I've only seen one species. I hope to see more
Oh wow.
someday.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, we're going to pivot to just regular science now. I saw that this was in your
Mhm.
many intros about you. Guys, this is an esker. What about glacial eskers sparked the most joy?
This is the best question I've ever gotten. I'm so happy. I have a little thing in my bio about how I love eskers, and no one ever asks me about eskers, so I'm thrilled. So in my graduate program, we did a lot of glacial geology. So I did a broad naturalist um, graduate program that looked at the landscape as sort of a layer cake. So we looked at the different layers, the deep down geology, the geology that's on top, the superficial stuff. We looked at soil, we looked at plants, we looked at animals, we looked at the atmosphere and human impacts. And so because my grad program was in Vermont, we looked at glacial geology a lot because the whole state has just been completely altered by glaciers. And so my geology professor took me to this place where there was one of these long snaking sinuous hills, and the one we were on actually split. So at one point it kind of split into a V, and he had us stand on this thing, and it was made of gravel, and there were different trees growing on it than anywhere else because it was just this pile of gravel. And he said, okay, what is this? And we were all so confused and none of us guessed it. So it's an esker, which is it's hard to fathom how tall the ice sheets were. They were so incredibly tall that they compressed the earth down, and where I live, it's still rebounding. So when they started to melt, there were these tubes of high pressure meltwater that would shoot at the base of them, and they were basically rivers in the ice, and rivers carry sediment, little river pebbles. So what an esker is the pebbles from an ice river. And so you'll see them split and weave around and rejoin sometimes because that's what rivers do. So you're basically in a riverbed, but then as the ice melted away, you get this kind of raised structure. So that's what an esker is you're walking an ancient, gigantic river. And up in the Northeast, people did not know what these were when they started excavating them. When the colonists came over, they thought, oh, this is a great place for a gravel pit. And then they would dig slightly over here and there was no gravel, and slightly over here and there was no gravel. And they were so confused why these things were here. So that's what an esker is this inverse river. And I just think that's amazing.
Wow. So is there like different kinds of plants and stuff on it because it's different than like the surrounding area? Is that typical or
Yeah, it's just made of different cobbles and kind of, the sort of rocks that you'd get at the bottom of a river. So there's not as much soil. There's some soil, but it's mostly just a gravel tube. And so there are only certain kinds of trees that can handle that level of dryness. So you might get beech trees or that kind of thing on the esker, and not other places. And often as you walk along the top, you'll just see these little chunks of rock, and just imagining them being carried by this sub ice river is just the coolest thing to me.
are there any like famous eskers in the US to like go visit or something?
Oh, well, I don't know about famous. There are eskers all over. And where I live, there's a park called, I think, Esker State Park or something like that, that is named for having an esker. I think that there might have been eskers that were turned into like ancient roads in some places. I've heard like there were Roman roads built on eskers or something like that, but I'm not sure if there are any world famous eskers. I think they're just famous to nerds like us. But
That works. I mean,
yeah.
I guess you just Google Esker State Park in any state, and if it comes
Mhm.
up, then go there. That's
Yeah, if
neat.
you get the chance to go to one, there's nothing like walking on a giant ancient river. It's so cool.
Yeah. It's really hard to, I mean, obviously this is an aerial picture. It's kind of hard to understand it from a human perspective, but that's cool. Wow. All right. Well, obviously as an Audubon group, a lot of us here are birders. What is an underrated science topic that you think our membership might enjoy learning about that perhaps isn't directly bird related? And I just pulled some of your current comics about other topics. I don't know if these are related to what you're going to say, but
I wasn't going to mention snakes, but I definitely will because I I don't know if any of you are snake phobic, and I apologize. I love snakes so much. So a few years ago, I was feeling sort of stressed out, and I needed a project, almost like a needlepoint type project, where I was kind of drawing the same little pattern over and over. So I drew every snake in Canada and the US. I think it was 600 and something. And I had a biologist go through and help me arrange them all taxonomically. And they were all accurate according to length. And I realized, looking at this poster, that there is just as much beauty in the snakes of North America as there are in the birds. They're all different colors and shapes and eating styles. So if you haven't noticed your local snakes, I highly recommend. There are so many really beautiful ones. But yeah, I was going to bring up butterflies too. I know pollinators are getting really popular, but what I like about butterflies is that a lot of them are very specific about which plants their caterpillars can eat, their host plants. So learning about butterflies means that you get to learn about the plants that they enjoy too. And butterflies stay still, and they're not as smart as birds, so you can sneak up and get a good picture. So if you get frustrated with birds, do the butterfly thing. I really recommend it.
That's a good tip. We have a lot of photographers in the group.
Mhm.
And I was poking around your website too, and you have a web shop, and is that like snake illustration in that? I noticed you had some nature guides, like posters and stuff for sale.
Yeah, the snake poster's in there. It's so big that I couldn't put it on my website and still have it be readable, because it's, 600 and something snakes, 632 or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely on there. I was just really proud of it. I just think, some they're snakes that are this big, and then huge snakes, and that just the patterns are really stunning. And so, they shouldn't be overlooked. I think they're pretty gorgeous.
That's really cool. Well, we'll have a link, the visual link to your website at the end of this. So if anyone wants to check that out, they can go find that there. Cool. So like I said in the beginning, we went to Hog Island together, and I remember from that you're a big fan of moths. So I don't really know a lot about them. I'm trying to learn a little more this summer. Do you have any tips or resources for a newbie like me?
Yeah, I get this question a lot because I do a lot of mothing. I have to confess that I don't have my own moth setup because I don't have a yard. But what I recommend is get to know some friends who go mothing. So there's a thing called National Moth Week, and I forget when it is. I think it might be in July. It might be in end of June. I'm not sure. But people have events all over the place, and they have a website that shows events across the United States, and they're often public moth nights. So what a moth night involves is getting a sheet out, a white sheet, and then shining different types of lights, sometimes high power white lights, sometimes ultraviolet lights, and you shine them on the sheet, and then slowly over the night, more and more moths arrive. You can also look for moths that are not attracted to lights by making this disgusting brew. I think the National Moth Week website has a recipe for it. It's like fermented beer and bananas. It's really gross, but you paint it on a tree, and then the moths will come. And what's great is they sit on this white sheet, and then it looks very much like this. So you take, photos of these moths, and they're just like absolutely beautiful. The variety is really incredible. There's also a really great field guide. I think it's the Peterson Guide to Moths that came out. It is, unfortunately, it doesn't have all the moths because there are so many moths and there are new ones being discovered. Butterflies are a tiny subset of moths. The moths, people call it the dark side. It's a huge world. There's thousands and thousands, but that'll get you started. And once you get hooked, you will never go back. And you don't have to get up early. You stay up late, you party with your friends, you eat delicious food, you hang out, and then every now and then you wander over and look at the moth sheets. So moth nights are very nice for those of us who are not morning people, which includes me.
That sounds great. I feel like I've mostly seen the middle one, impossible to ID species. I've tried to use Seek for a couple I saw this summer, and it was like, cool, good luck. That's neat about Peterson. I didn't realize there was a book. I'll have to check that out.
It's great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it works really well. And yeah, that one in the middle is actually, it cannot be there are two species that look like that, and they cannot be ID'd without dissecting the genitalia. So good luck.
Um,
Some moths are just really challenging.
this is a bonus question I didn't prep you for, but are there, like you were talking about butterflies and pollinator plants, are there like what kind of plants or habitat do you create to attract moths or make it a moth friendly habitat? Is it similar to butterflies?
Well, that is a really good question. And like I said, I don't have a yard, so I haven't delved into that kind of thing. But that guide, the Peterson guide, does talk about the host plants for all of the different moths. And I think they encourage you to have a real diversity of native plants. Some of them do eat trees too. But it'll go through and explain the different trees and the different plants that they like. And a lot of the native plants that we grow for butterflies are also really great for moths. So, you'll find moths on goldenrod, and you'll find moths, coming to, bee balm. You'll find your hummingbird moths and stuff. So a lot of the things that we think of as butterflies are actually moths flying around. So you can definitely attract a lot of those too. But then, with some of the fancier species, it's kind of luck of the draw whether you wind up getting them.
Okay, that's fair. So it sounds like this Peterson guide is where it's at. Cool.
Yeah, and National Moth Week, go check out their website because they've
All
got
right.
all sorts of good stuff.
Cool. All right. So now we're going to pivot into some art questions. One thing I love about your work is it's very smart and very accessible. So how did you arrive at cartooning as an education and communication tool? I mean, I know you said you read comics when you were little, and you showed that example when you were a kid, but you know, I'm an artist too. No one really you never think you're gonna grow up and be one. Like how did you get there?
Yeah, Stephanie's art is amazing for anyone. I'm assuming most of you are familiar, but if you're not, you need to go check it out because it's really, really, really cool. I think I have one of your stickers on something.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, there are other ways of communicating science for sure, especially videos right now are the hot new thing. I think comics are just what I do because I grew up reading them. I've never been as much a performer as I've been the quiet kid hiding in the corner drawing. So that's why I did what I did. My real aha moment came in sixth grade when I was at a friend's house and they had a bird guide, and I started reading it and I realized I didn't recognize any of these bird species. And then I slowly started to realize that the whole book was a joke. So the series that really got me started is Little Known and Seldom Seen Birds of North America. It's an older series. If anyone has not seen these, you have to find them. I feel like people don't know about them nowadays, but they're by Ben Catherine and John Sill, and they are fake made up birds. There's like a duck that has like a target on its belly, and there's like a plover that has one leg shorter than the other so it can only walk in a giant circle, and they're hysterical, but they're all like exquisitely watercolored. And I realized that you could have text and art and have this kind of dry humor, and that it's just a real delight, and that people who are not bird watchers will enjoy it because it's so funny. So I think it was finding that series and just cracking up over that, and I thought, hey, I can do something kind of similar to that. So that was what got me started.
I love that. I feel like the modern day version of that is that Effin' Bird series, if anyone's
Yeah,
seen that. The guy makes up crazy names for real birds. It's a lot of fun. That's neat. We'll have to check that out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, do you have any ways you like to kickstart your creativity whenever you're looking for inspiration?
This is so silly. Whenever I feel really stuck, I take a shower. And I'm not the only cartoonist who does this. Do you do this, Stephanie? Like I'll be like,
I
I'm
feel like
stuck.
driving really helps me when I'm stuck. Definitely stepping away, but like
Yes.
yeah, I feel like a lot of ideas when I'm driving.
Yeah, if you're feeling stressed, you really have to and there's some science behind this, but if you stop doing what you're doing and you go and do something else and you kind of switch the type of thing your brain's doing, then you'll be better able to jump back to the other problem. But there's something about the shower. I don't know what it is. And it's not just me. I have friends who do this too. Take a shower. unless you've already had several showers and you don't really need one, but there's something about going for a shower that kickstarts me. And then also going to talks and going for field walks always helps me out too, and talking to other bird people. So I appreciate that opportunity as well.
Definitely. I think going for bird walks helps me too. Like anything to just completely reroute your brain, come back to it with fresh eyes. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do
Even
you
if
have
it's 10
any other
showers.
tips? Yeah, driving and going for bird walks.
I love that. So in this age of technology, images get shared all over the place, sometimes without credit. How do you
Mhm.
feel about your work being reposted online, and has it had any effect on your career?
Yeah, I think it has. It's hard to measure how much it has. I will never forget the time I was at a comic convention and a woman came up to me, just this young woman, and she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, I see your stuff reposted all the time without credit and it makes me so sad." And then she walked away. I was just really, really sad. I was like, "You do? Oh no."
Cool, cool way to
It's
drop that bomb.
yeah, I mean, she was being sweet, she felt bad. There are things you can do to prevent it, but a lot of them involve just putting a giant watermark across what you do. People have done amazing things to shred my watermarks off of, to snip my watermark off of things. What I find though is that there's this sort of army of people who will angrily comment that it's mine and they'll link to my stuff. And I'm sure they're missing, 99% of it, but it's so incredibly sweet that that makes me happy. There's only so much you can do. I try to have a distinctive enough style that people will know who I am and track me down. But what I would recommend is, if you're out there in the wilds of the internet and you see a comic that isn't credited, that is a real bummer to the creator. So if you can credit it, I appreciate it. People will often write DM for credit, which it doesn't that doesn't work unless the creator sees it, you know what I mean? So then we have to go and DM 50,000 people. So just try to credit stuff. Usually creators are thrilled to have you share their stuff and then you put a link back. We're so happy. So just do that. But yeah, there's only so much we can do. It's kind of a bummer.
So basically start an army of fans to fight for you if you can.
Yeah, or have a really distinctive style. I mean, I feel like,
Yeah.
effing birds, like you would not confuse an effing birds thing, or like an XKCD comic or something like with the stick figures. Like these are really like really, really recognizable things. So but some of us are a little less recognizable. So yeah, just kind
Well,
of
you're very recognized in this circle. When we said you were
Oh,
coming,
thanks.
everyone's like, "Oh, I know that." If they didn't know your
Oh.
name, they knew your comics for sure. So, yeah, good to be original.
Oh, I just saw a question pop up where someone says, I don't know what you mean by DM. So DM stands for direct message, and sometimes people will there are a lot of people who sort of make their money off of sharing other people's uncredited work to build a giant following that they can then use to sell ads. And the way they get around getting yelled at when people are like, you stole this from someone, is they will say, unknown creator DM for credit, which is basically their way of kind of trying to cover their butt. They'll say, I don't know who this is by, but if you tell me, I'll post about it, which is kind of a cop out because then creators have to be constantly searching for their art somehow, which you can't really do. And then direct messaging these people, on Instagram, sending them an email basically every time and saying, hey, that's mine. So it doesn't take too long to look up a creator and, credit them.
Definitely. Um, I can't take credit for this question or the Esker question. That was from Caitlin as well.
Good
And
question.
I know you said that you have not found a lot of time to nature journal, and her question was about reading a book called Expedition Backyard, which is that one of your books or
Yeah, that was a graphic novel that I did with an artist named Bingling Hu. And yeah, they did the art for the book and I wrote it, and it's an early reader graphic novel about going outside, and there's a nature journaling component where one of the characters is keeping a journal the whole time, and we talk about how to do that.
Yeah, do you have
Yeah.
any favorite nature journalers yourself that you recommend people to check out?
Yeah,
Um,
so it's terrible. I know a lot of people who do, and I think it's great that it happens. And I don't keep a nature journal, which I feel bad about because I am always drawing and writing about birds and animals. So I sort of feel like if I did that in my free time, I would, that would be all I did. But I recommend the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. Stephanie, have you been to that
I have
conference?
not, but I think did Jean teach at it? One of our Hog Island teachers?
I think she might have. It's incredible. So it's run by John Muir Laws, who wrote the book. I joke about it, but I always have this book within arm's reach everywhere I go. So it's the
There we
Laws Guide
go.
to Drawing
Yes.
Birds. This thing, if you're drawing birds, this is all you need. It's so incredible. It's got, really detailed stuff. Like this is just literally how to draw waterfowl. So John Muir Laws runs or started the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, and I've spoken at it 2 years in a row. So I'm guessing I probably won't speak at it again this coming year, but it's an all virtual festival and it's wonderful and it's full of classes and you get to share your work, and 100% recommend if you're a nature journaler, you have to come to this thing. It's super inspiring.
Yeah, I think I took that book out before we went to Hog Island because I didn't know what I was getting into, but I definitely get that, not having time for everything. So,
Yeah. He's got a nature journaling guide too, but I use his bird guide
yeah,
constantly.
that's great. Um, what is one piece of advice you wish you could go back in time and give to your younger self?
Yeah, I think I would just say, I feel like this is going to be me being really philosophical, but life doesn't really happen in an arc. So I wouldn't necessarily go back and say, do this, don't do this. But what I would probably say is, hey, kid, you may feel like the weirdo who's out in nature and people are making fun of you and you would rather hug a tree than talk to people, but that's okay. People are later going to like that this is who you are and that these are your interests. Because I feel like, I don't know, growing up has just been a process of becoming an adult version of who I was at 8. Um, and I would just probably go back and say, you're on the right track. I promise you, I know that you're drawing in class and your teachers are mad at you for it, but that's going to probably pay off more than algebra. No offense to algebra. But for me, yeah, that was it. It's just, stick with what you really like and just keep doing it.
I really relate to that. I feel like, I'm in my mid 30s and yes, I'm just like going back to all the things I loved when I was 10, including
Yeah.
birds.
Not all of them. I'm not still into My Little Ponies as much.
That's fair. But if they had a My Little Pony movie, kind of like Barbie, I would definitely go see that.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So here is some info about you if people want to find you online. We do have a couple questions in the
Yeah.
chat.
I haven't been looking
Um,
at the chat. I just saw that one question that popped up, but yeah,
yeah, no,
please go ahead
don't look at the
and
chat. It
fire.
derails you. This is for the end. So we have Margaret asking, did it take you a while to discover your humorous approach?
Uh, I think I was always really silly. I was kind of a serious kid, but I loved making jokes in comics form. I feel like my sense of humor has changed over time. But also everybody's sense of humor has sort of changed over time. Like what we think is funny, you look at old movies and some of them are funny, but some of them aren't. So I feel like, I don't know, I just try to consume media that I still find really funny and hopefully stick with it. But I don't know, there's something about humor as a tool to bond with people and also to deal with some of the most stressful issues that we deal with that works really well for me.
I agree with that. I feel like in COVID times, I really leaned into memes and funny things. It really, it's the best of both worlds. Helps you with hard times and helps you with the good things too.
Yeah, and it helps you learn too. I mean, I was thinking about it for a different talk once about how humor can really solidify facts in your brain. So I grew up watching The Simpsons, and this was back when the whole family would cluster around the TV every week to watch this thing. And so I remember watching an episode of The Simpsons where Lisa Simpson is teaching Maggie, the little baby, with a set of like really elite flashcards, vocabulary flashcards. And one of the flashcards said zebu. And I know what a zebu is from, which is like a certain kind of fancy cow from The Simpsons, which I think is hilarious because comedy can just solidify facts in your brain if it's funny enough, which is powerful.
Spreading the Zebu love. I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a really, really nice message from Katie to you in the chat that when you get a moment you should
Oh,
read. It's no question, just some praise.
oh,
Um,
thanks, Katie.
Apparently there was a My Little Pony movie that came out in 2017
Oh
that
my
I
goodness.
missed, but again, it needs to be in like Barbie form. Like if Greta Gerwig's on it, I'm in. And
100%. She's wearing like little paws or little
yes.
hooves. Yeah.
And then we have someone asking about some of the tools you use. What tools do you use or would you use for digital drawing?
Oh, good question. So there are probably better tools than what I use, because I've been doing the same ones for 15, 20 years, but I use Photoshop. I Photoshop is such a pain to learn, but once you learn it, it's sort of becomes second nature. I draw with the pencil tool. I don't use any anti-aliasing or paintbrush stuff. I just use pure line art and then I color in with that. And I have a million different layers that are all called like Untitled Layer 3 or whatever. But I use Photoshop to draw. Occasionally I wind up having to use Illustrator for some kind of commission. But yeah, it's all Photoshop. And then I have a Wacom tablet and I have a stylus and yeah, that's how I do stuff.
Yeah, so Wacom is like a digital drawing pad kind of that just goes directly into your computer or tablet or whatever for anyone that's not sure what that is.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you. And there are better ways to do things. I know there's a program called Clip Studio that I think a lot of people use now. A lot of people draw directly onto their iPad. But this is just how I have been doing it for ages. And so that's how I do it.
um, it's nice to meet a fellow Photoshopper because I am also stuck in the
Yeah.
Stone Age and I do the same thing. It's a real shame I don't really know how to use Illustrator.
It's funny that Photoshop is a Stone Age because when I was starting comics, it was a light table and crow quill, and real ink and rulers and no digital at all. And now now Photoshop is old school.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, I guess there's no other questions. Is there anything you'd like to promote or, for anyone to check out? I know you said you had 3 books you can't really talk about, but is there any conferences coming up? Whatever's going on in your world.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm always doing talks. I have a residency at a museum coming up in Vermont in April, I think. I'm going to be at the Biggest Week Festival in Ohio again. I'm going to be at the Connecticut Ornithological Society's meeting. I'm just doing a lot of random different talks. But yeah, if you are also a cartoonist and you make funny cartoons, please email them to me because I would love to see them. It's always good to connect with other people who are doing that. So please send.
It seems like maybe one of our junior birders is. I'm not sure because his dad is
Wow,
asking the
send.
question, so that would be cool if he does. Oh, and I put your Patreon on here. I saw that on your Facebook. It looks like that's pretty new for you. What's going on? What's going on there?
Oh, yeah. So I had a Patreon a while ago. That's a subscription service where people can pay a certain amount to support me per cartoon. And then I Patreon had a lot of problems and people were being charged and then not charged. And so it was more trouble than it was worth, but they've kind of fixed some things. So I'm back. So I'm just charging people $1 per cartoon. And then I make a blog post about each comic. And if you're interested in a detailed species by species breakdown of every cartoon, I've got it. So you can sign up for that, and you do not have to read the whole thing. But yeah, that's what I've got going on Patreon. So I really appreciate the support there.
All right, awesome. Well, unless anyone else has any other questions, thank you so much for your time. This was great. You have a lot of big fans here in PA. And
Oh,
yeah, we'll just keep checking out your work. You know, I see it mostly on Instagram, but you have a really comprehensive website, all your back catalog of cartoons if people aren't familiar, really cool web shop. So check it out, everyone.
yeah. Thank you so much. And Stephanie, thanks so much. It was really lovely to see you again. And maybe I'll see you at Hog Island sometime
Yes.
soon. And also everybody go look at Stephanie's art because it's super, super cool. It's so
Oh,
great.
well, thank
We
you very
are
much.
kindred spirits. So yeah, thanks. And thanks everybody for the great questions.
All right. I guess, is that it, Pat? Do we just leave?
Yes, I will stop recording now.